Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Just a quick shout out to the T5 peeps: Bob the Dragon, Crab Lobster, Datamagnet, DuckMachine, Mezec, Try Again 95, Feudic Jarl, Astraya the Dreamer, Casper Arnholtz, Maxwell, Ithilia, Meridian 117, and Jordan Buxbaum. Thank you very much. Story number 1. Divide and Conquer, written by Mad Mechanic / Silver Glove Gaming. Humans. They were the first race to reach the stars, the first to claim other worlds as their own, and the first to discover that they were not, in fact, alone out there. And they accomplished all of this nearly 10,000 standard galactic cycles before anyone else. When the Volan rose from the forests of Kunara and turned their collector sights in the stars, the humans were waiting for them. They extended a hand of friendship, offered them technology, knowledge, and armistice. The Volan accepted without a second thought, and soon the first union was born as a joint government between the humans and the Volan. And for another 5,000 years they cooperated and coexisted, founding millions of colonies throughout the galaxy, and establishing hyperlanes that are a foundation of our modern way of life. Then the hives of Talsula united across their entire world and spread like a nightmarish disease throughout the galaxy. The humans and Volan tried to be peaceful, but the hive ignored them. They sent diplomats, but the hive consumed them, and before anyone saw it coming, the hive attacked the first union. At first, the Volan began losing worlds, so the humans sent their grand fleet to intervene. But little did they know that the invasion was a distraction from the targeted strike on Olympia, the human homeworld. And at this news, the Volan pushed the hive from their territory and sent aid to the humans, exposing their own homeworld. These came to be known as the Swing Wars, so called because the tide of war kept changing to favor a different side. It raged on for an amount of time that none can even remember. Millions of humans and Volan colonies were presumed destroyed or irredeemably damaged. Most species currently part of the Galactic Council were uplifted or discovered by the First Union during this period. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the species discovered by the Hive, who saw them as nothing more than food. In the end, thousands of species, independent and vassalized by their own discretion, from Garden Worlders to Death Worlders, all stood together with the First Union against the Hive and, to the dismay of the extremely xenophilic humans and Volan, drove them to extinction. Years passed, and the worlds lost were declared memorials. The galaxy moved on. Alliances were formed, allies were betrayed, foes argued. All was as it should be. Then we discovered humans again. A ship from a small star cluster arrived on Olympia bearing the flag of a hitherto undiscovered race. Then, upon investigation, it was discovered that a group of human colonies survived the Swing Wars and were trying to rebuild so that they could go home. But upon discovering that they had been declared the site of a war memorial, the self-proclaimed Orion Collective declared themselves independent from the human empire. The galaxy held its breath, anticipating another war. No one had ever gone against the oldest race before. And then the Empire recognized their independence and invited them to join the First Union as its third member. Not long after, another world was discovered with humans and Volan, but this time their world had been sent back to the Iron Age, with humans and Volan city-states competing for trade routes. They were uplifted, their differences reconciled, and they were given choices: join the First Union as a new member, or go it alone as a sovereign nation with support from the Union. They chose the latter, and became the United Clans of Sanharo. This trend continued for millions of years, humans and Volan being discovered everywhere, either together on the same world or apart. Many times they had evolved features to compensate for their new homeworlds. Sometimes they were discovered as hyper-advanced utopias that were nearly on par with the original nations. Other times they were discovered as paranoid primitives during the Iron Age. This became a new normal, until a new world was discovered. A Class 14 Hell world, and the site of an ancient joint genetic modification project between the Volan and the humans to make their colonists viable for such a hellish environment. Problem was, the only way to modify any beings was to modify the genetic code of a fetus in gestation. In short, a colony ship full of Hellworld-compatible Volan and human infants crashed on a planet during the Swing Wars. If it wasn't for the care of the primitive species, very similar to humans, these children would have died within a few days. But they didn't. They rose from the wreckage and hunted and gathered together, learning from the semi-sentient beings that nurtured them. But evolution is often cruel. While the Hellworld humans evolved and overcame, the Volan devolved back into primitive pack beasts that would terrorize human groups. But somewhere, somehow, something deep inside of them awakened, and they began to coexist, not as Beastmaster and Beast, but often closer than family. Then they were discovered. The galaxy was shocked. The two oldest and the most cunning races adapted and evolved to thrive on a Hell world, and yet, through some deep embedded instinct, they were still inseparable, and had managed to build a primitive spacefaring civilization. Madness! Utter madness! The galaxy almost immediately decided that these beings were too dangerous to be left alive, and assembled the largest war fleet since the Swing Wars to eradicate them. You can imagine their surprise when they arrived only to see what seemed like the entire human and Volan fleet from both within and outside the Union. A message was broadcast from the largest of the warships, and has been remembered as the sole reason that no one has ever attacked humans or Volan. To those with common sense, turn around. To those of you with useful foolishness, you proceed with the fate of your entire species at risk. We all know what happened to the Sanzara following the standoff. As it turns out, Terrans may have been 300 years behind the point that most races discovered FTL. But with the Terrans' increased adaptability and rate of advancement, it's estimated that they were only around 30 local years from discovering it themselves. Soon, after learning that their beloved dogs, who had been their loyal companions for as long as they could remember, were in fact the devolved counterpart of humanity's first ally, they set to work to genetically modify them to uplift them back to sentience. On that day was born the United Nations of Terra, and small nation that quickly grew to the same stature of the Union, and seeing human without their distinctly grey skin and black eyes, or an extremely loyal Volan with fur soon became as common as their natural counterparts. The term divide and conquer soon applied to both species. They quickly became the backbone of the galaxy's science, exploration, labor, and military, accomplishing feats that are physically impossible for other species. From lifting literal tanks to save fellow comrades to studying without protection in environments that would tear any other sentient apart. And because of this, when the Terraway was opened and the Elder Chaos invaded from its Eldritch universe, we sent them our own monsters. We sent them the Terrans. And Hell itself halted in fear. End of story. Story number 2. Terra Invicta, written by Silver Glove Gaming / Mad Mechanic. Ever since the Swing Wars, the mass species uplifted by the First Union have been trying to prove their worth to the oldest species in the galaxy. The Trixler were one of them. They were physically a small race, even by Volan standards, tribedal, with 2 limbs for manipulation and the privilege of having evolved on a garden world with no natural predators. This was their downfall, as they constantly felt the need to prove themselves to rough-worlders and death-worlders. This led them to abusing a small quirk in physics in an attempt to impress the humans in Volan with a workaround on the long strips through hyperlanes. The idea was to bend space and bring 2 points closer together in 4D space, before punching a hole from point A to point B. In short, portals. They were conducting their experiments in a trinary star system near the galactic rim, chosen for the large amount of resource-rich planets present. the system no longer exists. When the portal was activated, there was a flash that could be seen from as far away as nomad nations orbiting beyond the galactic rim. At the system, the scientists in it, everything really was just gone. In its place stood to tear into an unknown universe. The supposed hull wasn't punched from point A to point B. It got punched into something in between. A horrifying place beyond the comprehension of sentience, from which arose a threat unlike anything the galaxy had seen. We called it the Elder Chaos, and to this day, hundreds of years later, it is still debated whether it was a transcendent entity or the universe itself. What we learned too late was that people died from a type of fear that no one had experienced before whenever they looked at it. Then, a Terran scientist accidentally gazed at it, and nothing happened. We learned something about the Terrans that day. Their homeworld had produced something within them that they called existential dread. The same fear that had killed so many was just a memory of Earth to them. So it was decided. The humans in Volan discussed with Terra to send their soldiers to fight the void-spawned eldritch horrors that followed the Elder Chaos. It didn't take much to convince them. The Union representatives only had to compare the enemy to a continent on Earth called Australia, for every Terran to go into the front lines in order to prove them wrong. We expected a slaughter. In a way, we were right. We just didn't expect the slaughterers to be the Terran. System by system, planet by planet, trench by trench, Terra's sons and daughters fought against the Elder Chaos, and surprisingly, pushed it back. They didn't care about the differences in species. They fought as one. Apparently, this was common on Earth, where pack hunters would work together for mutual gain. And then, the Terrans surprised us again. The video went viral on the Galactic Network. It showed a Terran trench with their humans and Volan, or hounds, as the Terrans variant preferred, fighting back a horde of entities that had, thankfully, been censored to preserve the viewer's mind. Suddenly, one of the hounds can be seen falling to the ground in a puddle of red blood, obviously having been hit by a project of some kind. Without warning, a roar rose up from the humans in the trench, some animalistic instinct enraged at the death of a hound. Then they charged. Complete mind-clouding fury, the kind that is only seen in wild animals on other worlds. And humans weren't the only ones that did it. Hounds did the same when humans died. The galaxy no longer knew who to be more afraid of, Terrans or Elder Chaos. Yet they continued fighting, eventually pushing the Eldritch Nightmare back through the very portal it came through, and sealed it in. But the Elder Chaos couldn't go down that easily. So in a last-ditch effort at revenge, it opened a portal in the way of Earth's orbit and pulled it into the other side, while simultaneously transporting every Terran in the universe as well. The galaxy mourned the loss of its newest member and its heroes. Monuments were constructed on the worlds where Terrans fought, and the First Union continued trying to get their Hellworld counterparts back. Then, one day, Earth reappeared in a system near where it used to be, in a stable orbit around its star in the Goldilocks zone. No one had been watching this part of space since Terrans vanished. They started reappearing in places throughout the galaxy, equipped in full combat gear, often still in combat formation. One of them appeared inside the Galactic Council chambers, a human, his visor shattered, a bandage over his one eye and a missing arm, the barrel of his mass accelerator still red-hot from the recent use. Council recordings showed that he looked around, oblivious to the momentous occasion that was the return of his species, before throwing his rifle to the floor and speaking to every shocked council. "You were right, it was worse than Australia. The enemy was on par with Canadian geese." No investigation was made into the faculty of the statement, and most Terrans just laugh every time they hear it, so there may not be a definitive answer anytime soon. Bloody Hellworlders, just be glad they're on our side. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.